Good afternoon and welcome to Uni4Me Live. And I'm delighted to welcome Kizzy this afternoon from the University of Reading, who's going to chat about preparing for higher education. So what can you actually do to put yourself in the best place for when you join later on this year or whenever you do decide to join. So I'll hand over to Kizzy.
Thanks, Martin. Hello, everybody. It's lovely to have you here and to be able to share this with you. I'm just going to try and share some slides, and hopefully I'm going to share the right window. That looks good to me. So hopefully you can now see my slides, and the right ones, not the ones with notes on. But yeah, as Martin said, we've got some kind of content here for you about how teaching is different in higher education compared to at school or college, and what you can be doing now to help you prepare for that transition, to make it as easy as possible and to be as successful as you can. And also a little bit about what support will be available to you in terms of your study skills once you get into higher education. So at the moment, you are probably at school or college. Obviously, some people watching might be students who have already completed their kind of A-level or equivalent study and are now doing other things. But I'm working on the assumption that most of you are probably at school or college or have a memory of being at school or college, and probably studying 3 or 4 subjects, typically in a classroom. And you might have some practical work or some lab-based work if you're doing something like chemistry, for example. And depending on your subject, again, you might have some coursework that you do. And if you're really lucky, although perhaps not so much in these times of COVID, you might get to go on some field trips and things like that. And I know that some schools and colleges also offer tutorials as a way of learning, but I think that's probably less common across the sector, so we're not going to go into that too much. But when you get to university, that's going to change slightly, and the things that you will be doing will be slightly dependent on the subject that you choose to study when you go into higher education. But here I've got kind of 3 pretty standard types of learning at university. So first of all, your lectures. Now these are typically big group activities, and in these times they might actually now be recorded or online, but in a kind of normal time or typically these could take place in what could be quite large lecture halls. So here at the University of Reading, for example, our largest lecture hall can hold around 400 people. But your lectures might not be this big, so don't worry about being in a room with 400 people, because it would depend on your subject and it would depend on kind of the size of the university or institution that you go to. And typically you've kind of got your lecturer stood at the front of the room providing you with information, and you're going to need to make notes, keep your notes organized, and your lectures are really your starting point for your further learning. They're your kind of introduction. You've got your lecturer giving you the information that you need. And then we've got seminars and tutorials. Now, I've found that in different institutions, these words tend to be used sort of interchangeably, and sometimes they're used as separate things. But in both of these, we're talking about small group activities, usually with a tutor and then a small group of your peers. And this is your chance to kind of either discuss or debate the things that you've been learning in your lectures, or maybe to practice a skill, or put something into practice that you've learned in your lectures. So for these, you're probably going to need to prepare in advance. So make sure that you've attended or watched your lecture, thought about any questions that you've got. There might be kind of pre-reading or things to prepare. So for example, if you're going to be having a debate, you might need to have prepared your argument in advance. And this is about small group learning. And some of the skills you're going to need for this are to be confident to ask those questions that you've got in that setting, perhaps some public speaking, and your critical thinking. These are your opportunity to really dig into that learning material that you've got from your lectures, so that you can really make sure that you understand it, get to interrogate it a bit, and really get the most from it. Now, I talked about in lectures you needing to take notes, and this is something that some people find really terrifying. And I know when I started at university, the idea of sitting in a lecture hall for 2 hours and needing to remember everything that was told to me seemed really kind of overwhelming. But you'll develop techniques of kind of abbreviating things and, using some form of shorthand, or just getting good at picking out the key points of what you need to learn. And this is something that I wish I had learned before I went to university, because it would have helped me keep my notes so much more organized. This is called the Cornell method of note-taking. And you sort of split up your page, as you can see on the slide here. So you give your lecture a title, and you make sure you put a date on it, because that's really helpful when you come back to revision to be like, when in the year did I do this? Was this semester, or was it another semester? You make a note of any keywords down the left-hand side. So anything you're going to need to remember as a piece of language when you come back to writing about this in any coursework, and any questions that you've got, because remember, you're going to be able to take those questions into your seminars or tutorials. You use that bigger box kind of in the middle and the right-hand side there to make your main notes. But the aim isn't to write down everything the lecturer said. It's just about picking out those key points. If you've got abbreviations that you can use, that's great. And also any kind of key thoughts that you have during the lecture. So I studied law when I did my undergraduate degree. And sometimes we'd be having a lecture and the lecturer would reference a piece of case law or something that we thought about before. And I'd be like, that links back to when we did this one. And so I'd just make a little note of that to link those topics together. So kind of main ideas, any key thoughts. And then at the bottom, after the lecture, you can write your own little summary, just a few sentences to summarize that lecture. And obviously that summary is not going to have all the detail in it, but it will, when you're looking back through your notes, when it comes to revision or just revisiting so that you don't forget things, you've got that summary to remind you what that lecture was about. And if that's something that then is relevant to an essay that you're writing, or is going to come up in an exam, you can go, oh yeah, this was this lecture, I need to read these bits of notes. Or, oh, this lecture was about something that's not relevant to this paper that I'm writing, so I can skip that one for now. And the whole point of the Cornell method here is to make your notes really easy to skim through, so that it's useful to you when it comes to revision, and also to help you organize your thoughts. So bear it in mind, go away and do some research on it, maybe try it out and see if it works for you. A great tip I've got for kind of practicing note-taking is to go and watch a YouTube video of a reasonable length. Don't set yourself up with 2 hours to begin with, but go and find a YouTube video on something that interests you, but that maybe you don't know everything about, and go and try and make some notes from it, and maybe give this a try and see if it works for you. Moving on from lectures, seminars, and tutorials, you might also, depending on the type of subject that you choose, find yourself doing practicals, lab work, or even site work. So here in this picture on the top, we've got some University of Reading students actually out on one of our archaeological dig sites, so actually putting into practice the theory that they've been learning. So practicals and lab and site work are really about applying the skills and the learning that you've been doing in the classroom and putting them into practice. And this is not only great for helping you understand what you've been learning, because doing can help you understand, but it's also an incredible development of a work skill. So if you want to be a pharmacologist or an archaeologist or something like that, being able to practice those skills and do them while you're at university, it's going to be really helpful for you when you get into the world of work. So keeping archaeology as an example there, your first ever dig won't be the first one you go to on your job if you've had a chance to practice that at university. And I would recommend keeping a record of these things that you do, because, like I said, useful to you in work, useful to reflect on. You'll probably learn things from doing these practicals that you can then apply into kind of exams and courseworks and things. Other differences and things to think about is that university study is very modular. So you will take a certain number of modules at certain points in the year. And this is actually quite different to, say, your standard A-level study, which these days has had kind of its modular nature removed. It's very linear. You start learning at the start of year 12 or year 1, and you learn 2 years worth of stuff, and then you do final exams at the end of those 2 years. Whereas at university, it is much more modular. And different universities will be more or less prescriptive around what modules you have to take and how much choice you have over the modules that you take. So some will have more or less compulsory modules and then more or less optional ones, but they'll all add up to the same kind of amount of learning. And you will probably have written work to do. Most courses lead up to a final dissertation or project, which is usually an extended piece of writing or an extended research. Some subjects have exams, some subjects don't, some modules have exams, some don't. And there are lots of other ways that you are assessed at university through poster creation or group presentations and things. So one of the things that you can be doing now to help you prepare for this is researching the courses that you are interested in. And universities publish their course outlines or specifications and also their module outlines or specifications. So you can go and research how many modules equaling how many credits you would have to do on a particular course. And then you can look at what those particular modules are, how they're assessed, how much teaching time there is for them, and so on. And you should be able to find these things on the university you're interested in's course page. But if you can't find them, just email them or message them or whatever system they've got and ask them about it, because it's available and we're happy to share it with you. It's a really frequent comment that we get, a question even that we get at the University of Reading is, can you tell me more about how this course is structured or how this course is taught? And we can just link you to various PDF documents and things to help you really understand. And you can use this knowledge, this research that you've done to ensure that when you're here, you're picking modules that are playing to your strengths. So if you feel like you're really strong at writing essays and doing coursework, but not so strong in exams, you can pick modules or courses that have a greater emphasis on coursework and essays and less emphasis on exams. So this is definitely one of those things where doing your research in advance is the best way to prepare. Because also you might find there are some courses or modules that are assessed in ways you haven't had experience of before. But learning that now gives you time to think about how you would do those things. And maybe even to speak to kind of teachers or whoever at your school or college now and be like, if I was assessed on a poster project, what would I need to do? Like, what would need to go on that? You know, how would I present it? And you can spend some time finding out about these things now. The other differences that I think are worth highlighting between kind of higher education and sixth form or college is that it's definitely about being more proactive in your learning rather than reactive. So if you find that things aren't making sense or you want some extra help, or even if you're really enjoying something and you want to find out more about it and extend your learning, then you can be proactive about that and go to the university, your lecturers, your tutors, and ask them for that advice and that support. There will be people that you can ask for advice around choosing your modules. So plenty of ways for you to really take control of your learning. The other difference is that you're going to have a lot more choice in what you study. So at the moment, if you're taking A-level maths, for example, your school or college will have picked an exam board, and that exam board will control exactly what every student taking A-level maths with that exam board across the country learns in their A-level maths. Whereas at university, you're going to get to pick which modules you take. So if I stay with maths as an example, obviously there's different types of maths and there's different applications of maths. So you could have two students who both study a BA in maths, but they could take different modules and come out having studied different bits of maths or applied it in different ways. Here at Reading, we do have compulsory modules, so all students will do some modules exactly the same to make sure that you've all got that equal foundation, but we then do have lots of flexibility around where you go with your optional modules. And university and higher education level study is really about depth of learning. So it's not necessarily about learning lots of things within a subject, but more about focusing in on the things within that subject you enjoy and learning about them at great detail. And you will be taught by leading experts in your field. Modules over time will vary, and you will be required to be more independent in your learning. So a bit more of kind of managing your own time and going back to that point I made about being proactive in what you need. Now, how do you prepare for that now? I've mentioned doing some research. I've mentioned learning techniques for note-taking. But there are other things that you can do. So here at the University of Reading, we have some OOCs or open online courses that you can do. And I know plenty of other institutions offer these. These aren't just a Reading thing. There's a website called Future Learn, for example, that has loads of online courses that you can do. And a lot of them are free. These can help you develop skills like academic writing, but can also help you develop subject knowledge in an area that you're particularly interested in. So we have, for example, an academic writing OOC, but we also have a virtual tour of ancient Rome. So if you're interested in classics or ancient history and you want to learn more about ancient Rome, then that one's there and is an option for you to develop your knowledge. If you're doing an EPQ or thinking about doing an EPQ, these again are a great way to practice that kind of academic writing and that independent research. So I'm a big fan of recommending EPQs. Not essential, but if it's an option to you, do consider it. And practice that independent working. Can you summarize some of the learning that you've done in school or college into notes and imagine it was a lecture? Can you take yourself off to the library and extend your knowledge by looking stuff up by yourself? If you're going to be potentially staying at home at when you go off to higher education, think about where you're going to study. But also if you're moving out, thinking about moving out, what would you want your study space to be like? Do you need lots of light? Do you want noise? Would you prefer to be in the library rather than in your bedroom? Just think about those things beforehand. Do your research, like I said before, and if the university that you're considering going to offers any pre-reading or reading lists to you, I'd really recommend having a look at them, because they will give you a flavour of what you're going to be studying, and also it's a great way to practice that independent learning and that research skill. Talk to current students. Lots of institutions have things like UniBuddy or ways to connect with current students. You can also do this at open days and things. And don't be afraid to ask those students questions like, how do you remember stuff from your lectures? How are your courses assessed? How long are your essays? Don't be afraid to ask those questions, because if they're going to help you feel comfortable and prepared for being at university, then they're great questions to ask. And on a practical level, get yourself some nice stationery or think about your laptop and what you're going to use. Just get yourself prepared for it, like in terms of materials. There will be plenty of support available to you when you get to university. So there'll be support within your department. Typically something like a personal tutor. So this is somebody that will either be available kind of all the time, or they will have office hours. And they'll be kind of your dedicated point of contact to go to for any kind of academic advice, or even just I'm having a hard time and I need some help kind of advice. That they will be there for you, and their job is to support you with those kinds of things. And then there's also kind of further academic support available through kind of your student support services or advice centre, depending on the institution you go to. And these guys are great for thinking about how to do certain things. So if you've never done a poster presentation, they've probably got like a little course or a seminar type thing you can go to on how to do a poster presentation to help you feel really confident in that. And then of course we've got all the kind of student support services. So library services are brilliant in terms of how to use the library, but also academic writing, referencing, all of those things. Use your library. We know from research and just from looking at students that those who use the library do better in their degrees. And don't just use it to get books, but use it for the people that are in there and gain what you can from them. And then we also have disability services for any student who needs that. And here at Reading, we have STAR mentors. So again, most institutions will provide some form of mentoring service. Now that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour and a lot of me talking. But if you are looking for kind of more information about this, obviously we've got the Uni4Me website where there are lots of things available. And there's a few other kind of websites on the screen where you could go away and find out more. But yeah, that's my whistle-stop tour of how to prepare for studying at university.
Thank you, Kizzy. I think that's really useful. I was just going to pick up a couple of the things. I think one of the biggest changes maybe between school and university is that for some people, they might not be living at home anymore. And so they don't get a call in the morning saying, it's time to get up.
Yep.
Come downstairs and get ready for school, because that doesn't exist.
Yep.
And also the chances are you may only be in university for 10, 12 hours a week, as opposed to being used to being in school 9 till 3 or whatever your particular hours. And I think there's a really important thing there about time management. And I just wondered if you had any tips for people about how do you go about managing your time?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've just recently had an open day, and a prospective student asked this exact question of one of our students who was presenting in the session around, how do you manage your time? And she said that her personal tutor back in first year had told her to consider her degree as a full-time job. Or maybe not quite, but consider your degree as 35 hours a week or whatever. And yes, you might only spend 12 of them in lectures, but you still need to find the time in the rest of the week to do your kind of independent research and things. So really scheduling that time for yourself, I think, is a good thing to do. And you might do that literally with kind of drawing out a paper timetable, but you might also put things in like a Google Calendar, for example, of kind of, yes, I've got these lectures, but also I'm holding this time to go to the library and do some research. Or, this time is when I get together with some others from my group and we have a kind of little study group session. So also, thinking about the fact that it's not just going to be you as well. So use other people. If you're living in halls, you're going to have people around you. If you're living in a shared house, again, there's going to be people around you. So can you kind of help each other get up in the morning and have group study times and things like that? And it might not look the same every week. So it might be that some weeks you've got more contact time than others. So if in 1 week you've got 12 hours of contact time in the university, that means you're doing another like 20 of independent learning or whatever. But if in another week you've got more labs or whatever, and you actually spend 20 hours on campus, you're not then going to do another 20 hours of independent outside. So kind of getting that taste of that idea of how many hours do I need, and then applying that in some way. But alarms and calendars and reminders are a great thing.
Yeah, and I think that tip about notebook and making lists of what, again, another big difference that I found when I went to university was that our lecturers told us what our essays were at the beginning of term, and just said, here's the title and that will be due in on that date there. And it felt like months and months ahead until about 24 hours before, where you
then you remember. No.
And you remembered,
they do try and remind you leading up to it. But that is another great selling point. If you've got kind of coursework based modules, that you are going to find out your coursework title really early on and be working towards it, which if you can keep it in your head is a great way for getting the most out of your lectures, because you can be like, oh yeah, this is exactly what I need to be writing about in that coursework that I've got coming up. But plan ahead, put those coursework titles and reminders in your calendar. And if you're the kind of person who will forget something that's 8-12 weeks in advance, put other reminders in, like, have you thought about your coursework? You've been at uni for 4 weeks. Is it time to review your notes and pull out anything that's going to be useful for your coursework now? No, absolutely. And just if people are getting ready to go in September or October, you mentioned the importance of libraries and
you know, as you quite rightly said, kind of at university, you're meant to go off really, and the lectures are a jumping off point for you to then go and do more research and find out a lot of stuff yourself. I'm just wondering, you know, if people want to start that process already, is there any advice you'd give them that they could look for, maybe recommendations for readings, etc.?
If you know where you're thinking about hoping to go in September, I would, if they haven't already made reading lists available to you, get in touch with them and ask them if they've got reading lists. So I know here at Reading, we publish reading lists on our applicant portal for students who've got offers from us. So they will go up. Some go up a bit earlier than others, but they do come. But also people can just email us and ask, and then we'll, so my team, for example, will go out to the academics in that school and ask them if there's any recommended reading or activities that they could do. So yeah, we can definitely find stuff out for you. Yeah,
brilliant. And I suppose, again, the big difference I noticed was when I did eventually find the library and realised I had to use it, was that all subjects have these things called journals. And I just wondered if you could say a little, because some people might not be familiar with what a journal is. Or
yeah, I'd definitely never come across a journal before I got to university. And I suppose in a way they're almost like academic magazines, in that they've got different articles written by different people, usually around a particular theme. There's usually a kind of a big database that you can search within your library that will kind of help you find them. And over time, you'll probably start to become familiar with names of specific journals that are particularly prominent in your subject area. But I suppose just treat them as another source of research, that they are just like a book, but instead of maybe being, 1,000 pages, it's probably shorter articles, probably a lot more detail on a very specific subject. But again, use your library services, not just to go in there and find the books, but also use your library staff to, what is a journal? How do I use it? How do I find them? And they're lovely people. They're definitely there to help you. Even if you can't physically get onto campus at the moment, I imagine most libraries, I know we are at Reading, our library support services are still running virtually. So you can still book those appointments and get that knowledge.
And sometimes through your university library, you have access to online materials, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so journals obviously normally cost money, but your university will have paid for the subscriptions to them so you can get them. Something I still benefit from as a member of staff actually is being able to access all of my university's resources online, either as ebooks or electronic versions of journals. So
great.
It's definitely there for you.
And I suppose one of the things I always think about is that, a student can go through a degree and they focus very much on the academic content of their course, if you like, and study really hard. But from a point of employability, what else can students do whilst they're at university, so they're putting themselves in a good position to maybe get a job at the end of it, and a job they really want to do?
Absolutely. So yeah, university is about more than just your degree. It's about developing those employability skills and things. So some courses will have kind of placement modules and things built into them. And if your course offers you a placement option, I think that's a great way to develop kind of employability skills and get a taste of working in that industry. But also there's usually kind of optional placement type modules, or your careers service can find you kind of help you find, they don't do it for you, help you find part-time work in the field that you're interested in. And then also careers services tend to run other sessions around how to, really reflect on those experiences and make the most from those skills, so that you then can feel confident marketing those skills in the future. What else was I going to say? And then also just getting involved with kind of student-led activities, so your clubs and societies as well. So there are usually subject societies as well, and quite often they do kinds of trips or get external speakers in and things. So they're another great way to, yes, improve your subject knowledge, but also get a taste of kind of what that subject means in the wider world. So LawSoc here at Reading, for example, do like mock trials and things, which are a great way to get experience of what it might be like to be in a courtroom and defending somebody.
Brilliant. And I suppose my last question for you would be, if you had a top tip, what's the one thing you wish you'd known when you went to university that you think now you're used to going out, maybe speaking to people, saying this is how best to prepare? What do you wish you'd actually done?
I actually changed my degree subject a couple of times before I settled where I was. I applied to do one thing, changed it halfway through first year, and then changed it again at the end of first year. So probably what I wish I had done was that really focused research into what actually was that subject going to be like at university. So what module options were going to be available to me and how were they going to be assessed? Particularly because I applied to do subjects, well, I applied to do philosophy first, which I loved as a concept from kind of reading in my spare time, but I'd never studied it before because it wasn't an option at my sixth form. So particularly if you're going to be applying for something that you've never studied before, go and do your research about what that subject really is and how it's assessed and how it's taught, because if you end up doing a subject that's assessed and taught in a way that doesn't suit you, then that's going to be harder than if you do a subject that is assessed and taught in a way that that's where your strength is.
Yeah, and I think it's worth remembering that, we've said this a few times in Uni4Me sessions, that there is no national curriculum for universities. So studying psychology at Reading, for example, could be a very different experience to studying psychology in Liverpool or studying psychology in Swansea.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so because of the difference on those courses, it really pays to look around and find out the areas.
Yeah.
One of the areas I did in my degree was something called parapsychology, which is talking about the supernatural, and that was fascinating. But there's not that many universities that maybe have parapsychology departments within them. And so I think kind of finding a niche, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you're someone like me who wasn't really sure exactly what they wanted to be doing, but had a vague idea, but wasn't 100% sure. Like I ended up really specializing in employment law, and when I started at university, that wasn't something that I knew I was going to be deeply fascinated in. And so choosing a university that offers more flexibility was actually turned out really well for me. So the fact that I could change my degree twice in my first year worked out really well for me. And like I said, some universities will have more or less compulsory modules and then allow you to pick your optional modules from kind of more or less of the university. So finding out where you're going lets you pick optional modules from outside of your department, for example. Just if you want that flexibility, look for it. But if you know that you're dead set on being an accountant, also, if you need professional accreditation because you've got a career in mind, find the courses that have got that professional accreditation, go for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really important. I think the other thing maybe is to point out, you don't necessarily have to settle on one subject.
Yep.
You can do what's called a joint honours degree. So for example, I did psychology and sociology, and then I had the option to focus on the subject that I really wanted to do in my final year.
Yep.
Which at the outset, when I first thought I wanted to go to university, I wanted to do psychology. By the time I finished my degree, it was the sociology that had really fired me.
Yeah.
So a bit like you, I kind of changed throughout my career, my experience.
Yeah. I suppose I got lucky because I did philosophy and politics is what I went to do. And so I did a philosophy module, a politics module, and then I got to pick a module from outside of my departments. And so I took the first term law module. Absolutely loved that and really didn't enjoy the introductory philosophy module. So I switched my degree to law and politics, and then really didn't enjoy the second term politics module, but loved the law module. So then I just dropped the politics and stuck with law for the rest of my degree.
Right. Brilliant. Yeah. So that flexibility, I think, is out there. And I think it's really important when you go to university is to have the courage to speak up.
Yes.
And to talk to people and to go for that support which is out there for you.
Yeah.
You know, I think we talk a lot about when you go to university, you're treated as an adult, and absolutely you are, but that doesn't mean there isn't help out there. It just means you've got to be a little bit proactive in going to seek it and not being afraid to put your hand up and say, how can I get help with this?
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Everybody that I've come across in a university support service really does want to support the students that are at their institution. And so, yeah, the bit about being an adult at university is going and asking for that help in the first place, because what you perhaps don't have is your form tutor who's looking out for you and also hearing from all of your subject teachers about how you're doing, who can then be like, oh, I hear you're struggling in maths. Here's a thing that can help you. You've got to be the person to go, I'm struggling in maths. Can someone help me?
Yeah. And I think as well, when I went to university, I thought I had a bit of imposter syndrome. I thought, am I actually clever enough to be here? And I think there's a fear of looking stupid.
Absolutely.
If you're in a room with 20 other people and you've got a question, I can almost guarantee you 19 of the others will have the same question.
Yeah, absolutely. And
well.
so, yeah, having that confidence to speak up in seminars and in tutorials and in those small groups, other people will thank you for asking the question because they had that question too. But yeah, we know that the people who ask for help are the people who do better. So even if you already think that you're an expert at academic writing and referencing, still go to the academic and writing and referencing sessions run by your library, because I bet there's still something they can teach you.
Yeah.
So maybe actually my top tip is to really normalize using support services, because they're also about helping you do even better. They're not just there for the people who are struggling.
Yeah, and your tutors, I'd say as well.
Yeah.
You know, some of my tutors would offer to look at draft essays, for example, and they give you feedback before the due date and help you improve it. So in the end, you'd end up getting a better mark.
Absolutely. I remember having an offer from a tutor to proofread and provide feedback on the first chapter of my dissertation. And so what I did is I'd written more than a chapter by the point at which they'd said they'd do this. So I just took out the chapter headings and gave them the first 3 chapters presented as one. I mean, one point of feedback was, this is quite a long chapter, but technically it was within the rules. So I still got feedback on all 3 chapters. So
That's right. Well, Kizzy, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. I think that's hopefully been very useful to the people watching today. And yeah, hopefully people will tune in for next week's session as well. So thanks again, Kizzy. Thanks.
No problem. Thanks, Martin.
Cheers.
Bye.